for joining us, everyone, on Astrology Today with Jeff Harman. I am Ella, Jeff's assistant. Thanks again for joining us on Fridays every week. We really appreciate it. So today, Jeff is going to talk about interrogation and electional astrology. And this is such an important thing in our lives. It's fascinating how you can pose a question to an astrologer and get an answer. So let's just jump right in, Jeff, because this is pretty special this week.
It is, yeah. And what I like to talk about is the tools that the ancient astrologers use and that I've been using for many, many years now, pushing a lot longer than I can imagine. But I would say the most important tools that an astrologer can use, in addition to the birth chart and location astrology and Vedic astrology, which is all your personal cycles, is something called interrogation astrology. Now, a lot of people know this as horary. That's the Latinized term. But the more ancient term was interrogations, which just simply means asking a question. And the other one is electional astrology. Now, what might electional astrology be? Well, interrogations are asking questions, and elections are picking auspicious times to sell a house, buy a house, move into a house, have an elective surgery election, take a trip, get married, any important thing, purchasing something important, or commencing any important event. Whereas interrogation is kind of the opposite. It's asking a question as to what you want to know. And literally anything under the sun can be asked. And I've always found this the most intriguing type of astrology. I ran into it in the 80s and I was just stunned. I'm like, wait a minute, you don't need your birth chart? And the answer is no, you don't. You need a clear, conscious intention of what you want to know about. And I find after years and years of doing this, the most important thing is to be very rooted in what it is you're asking. The less ambiguous you are and more specific you are, probably the more specific answer you're going to get out of the chart. Point in cases, lost items. I'll never forget, I had lost some keys. I left them on the bumper of a truck and I lost them. And I thought, well, it's got to be somewhere between here and a couple of miles away, where I ended up bringing my son's motorcycle on a trailer. And I drove back and forth several times and I couldn't find them. And finally I said, okay, this is getting frustrating and I can't lose these keys that had remote controls on and everything. So I went back in and I cast a chart specifically saying, where are these keys? And most importantly, am I going to find them? And I've had this happen with lost animals, cats, dogs, missing money. I mean, anything under the sun you can imagine. And it said I would find them. It absolutely said I would find them. That's encouraging right there, because if you're not going to find something, why bother, right? I mean, if it's gone, destroyed, or somebody stole them, you're kind of entering an effort in futility. So having that right off the bat, I knew I'd find them. And I knew they were somewhat of a distance from the house. Well, I got smart and I got on a motorcycle, which is much lower to the ground. And of course, you can see around you much better than you can in a vehicle, especially the truck I was in, large truck. So I spotted them right away, probably about a mile and a half away, right next to a school in the middle of the road. There they were. I just pulled over, grabbed them, and somebody had run over them, bent the keys in a couple spots, but magically the remotes are all there. So that's some examples. And I can tell you anything under the sun can be asked. Like I've had people say, oh my God, am I in danger? That's another big one. Where I've had many questions about missing people. I had one individual who went missing, and the girlfriend called me and said, are we going to find him? Where is he? This is crazy. His cell phone's now gone off. We know the last place we saw him on the tracking. And I said, he's alive right now, but I said, he's not going to be alive much longer. And I said, if you don't find him soon, well, that was exactly what the report was. 3 days later, or 2 days later, they had found him, and the coroner said he had died just the day before. So you can see positive things, and you can also see things that aren't so positive. But amazing, amazing science. And I'm going to give a few examples to just show people how this works. This is probably one of the most used tools in my practices because I find I get all the time. I have corporations that put me on retainer and they'll call me up and say, hey, we're looking at, hiring so-and-so. Are they in my best interest to hire? And as we all know, hiring employees is a big deal, especially when they're in strategic positions in large companies. And, it's very interesting how accurate it's been. I have people asking questions about, will they keep their job? Will they stay in play, or will they get laid off or fired? Relationships is a huge one. Oh my God, relationships. People in marriages or people wanting relationships or wondering when one's going to come around, or if the one they're in is going to continue, or is the person really attracted to me, or are they just, here for what they can get. So it's all these various different things. And it's really a formidable tool. And just to kind of explain a little bit how it works, the Eastern horizon is always the person, not always, but usually is the person asking the question. And that planet that rules the Eastern horizon represents the querent and their condition. And what's fascinating about it is if the chart doesn't mirror reality, I mean, if there ever was a mirror on the wall, this is probably it. And it's using the universe as a reflection to mirror back exactly what is happening. And it's absolutely stunning how accurate it has been over the years. I think my first interrogation was probably about 1981. And, back then, the tools were not as powerful as they are today. And if I could go back and look at all the interrogations I have cast over the last 48 years, I would bet that it's probably pushing 20,000 plus, maybe more. Just a lot of them weren't documented. The old days of computers, we didn't have the documentation, places to put descriptions in, and very detailed analysis, but it's absolutely stunning. And then the electional astrology is fascinating too. I've had so many people say to me, I've had my house on the market for a year and nobody's buying it, or 2 years. I had one lady, it was 2.5 years she had the house on the market, couldn't sell it. Hardly anybody interested. Rule place. And I said, well, take it off the market, break the contract. She says, oh, that's easy to do. It's over with. And I said, I'll give you a good time to put it back on the market. And that comes down to literally when you sign the contract and upload the files on the internet. Now, with big real estate companies, you're pretty much left with signing the contract either by DocuSign or sliding it across the table to the realtor. But here's what's interesting. That house sold. She said she had more people seeing that house and inquiring about it within the first 3 weeks than she had in the last 2.5, 3 years. And she ended up selling it for more than she was asking because two people are interested. And I've had that happen many, many times, from inexpensive houses to $30 million estates. And absolutely amazing. Electional astrology, again, is picking an auspicious time to commence an event. Take a trip. I've had so many examples of trips where people have left at inopportune times. And I told them, I said, I wouldn't fly at that time. And they've come back with the horror stories of how difficult the trip was. I've also had people take trips at really good times, and they always come back with, wow, that was just so amazing. Because you spend thousands of dollars on trips when you add up hotels, rent-a-cars, expenses, food, all that. And of course, we want to take a trip to what? Accomplish our goals or have fun. So it's really a fascinating study how the heavens mirror back what's going on at the time we commence events or ask questions. And this proves, in my opinion, the universe is truly an interactive consciousness between the soul force energy, which I think is far above astrology, and the astrology seems to be the interactive consciousness to us. It's absolutely amazing.
It sure is. And you and I use it all the time. Another good one for electional astrology is surgeries, time for surgery. right?
Yes.
That's a
Yes.
big one. A big one. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. I do that all the time. I have a lot of people getting elective surgeries for their eyes or cosmetic things or things that they need to get taken care of, dental surgery, etc. And what we find is it's actually not a great idea to tell your doctor you're using astrology, though I have a lot of doctors who are really into it. And what's fascinating is the day that you go in other words, when you leave your house, I actually tell people to get from the doctor or the dentist, whatever they're doing, the available dates so that we have an array of dates that I can select from. And then what I do is I choose the most auspicious date that I can get in what we call the mundane astrology, meaning what's happening in the sky. And then I match it to the person's birth chart. Because you're not going to tell a doctor or a dentist to do a procedure outside of their normal windows of business hours. So you have to get a selection from them of dates available, and then I pick from that. And it's absolutely been amazing. I had one lady a while back, she wanted to do this surgery, and it was quite involved. It was some stuff that was connected with cancer, and actually reconstructive surgery after the cancer. And she said, here's the dates I can go in. And I said, well, I can't find any of them that are good. Can't you wait until after this time? No, I don't want to do that. And she could have. She went in, and the results were atrocious. She literally almost died, and she was in her 60s, and she had literally a fever of 104. They had her on antibiotics, and they ultimately ended up redoing the surgery. And then I've had other people who've gone in at really auspicious times and they heal up. See, the moon is so important in this. See, the moon rules flow, and it also rules, you could say, spirit manifesting. So it's really important to have good lunar aspects. And most importantly, I try and get the body part or procedure that's going on. See, each sign of the zodiac rules an area of the body. See, the head is Aries. See, the shoulders and the neck is Taurus. So you go all the way down to Pisces, which is your feet. And it's amazing. I got into medical astrology many years ago. My mother actually turned me on to this in the late 70s. And it's stunning how accurate it is. And I've actually worked with a lot of doctors in comparative analysis to things. And it's pretty interesting how accurate it truly is. And I think a lot of doctors, I know my mother was trying to get this introduced into allopathic medicine. Forget it. The pharmaceutical companies run everything. But it is quite stunning how accurate it is. You can even see by the moon, there's tables that I have that come from the Middle Ages that literally you can extrapolate when you have a disease, ailment, or a healing process going on, when it's going to shift, and when it shifts, if it's going to be a positive shift, or you have to watch it and it's negative and you want to fortify it. So it's absolutely amazing. I've seen, like with my son, he would have fevers and, we'd be really worried. Oh my God, he's got a huge fever. Then I said, don't worry, it'll be gone right by about here. And exactly when the moon would hit there, it would just taper right off and he'd be around the house, jumping all over the place. So it's amazing. And I've seen a lot of this where I've worked with parents and their children, not only in questions and interrogation, but also comparing that to cycles and progressions in the birth chart. So these are all tools that are really amazing. And I've seen where people have had progressions or transits that are very, very challenging. You just experienced that yourself, Ella, just recently. And right when it was over, things all got improved. You know what I'm saying? So it's absolutely amazing.
Yeah, really amazing. I'm thinking about weddings. Now, would a wedding fall under electional astrology, right?
Absolutely. You bet. And, there's where interrogation and electional and compatibility can all three be really applied here. And there's a fourth thing I'll mention in a minute, and that's gemstones. The interesting thing is the time at which two people get married is really important. Why? Because what's ascending on the eastern horizon and descending on the western horizon represents the two partners. And depending on who initiates the election. And what's interesting is if you do not have agreement by geometric aspects between the rulers of the eastern western horizon, and the moon better be doing something lovely too. You're probably going to find it could be very challenging. I've had so many people over the years say to me, geez, Jeff, what happened to my marriage? You know, I got married and went Krakatoa right here. I said, well, you got married with the moon opposing Mars or whatever, doing some malefic thing, or the rulers doing that too, within so many degrees, usually ends up within so many years, especially by primary direction. So, and I've seen the opposite too, where people get married and they just have this, gondola ride through bliss by having the two aspects of the signifactors in trine or sextile conjunction over the next degrees, which equals so many years. So you can really set up a wedding election to be very auspicious. I've done a ton of wedding elections. I've also done conception elections, meaning where people want to conceive, where you take the woman's chart and you extrapolate the lunations, meaning each new moon in her chart every month, and you can find which months are much more auspicious. I've actually worked with doctors on this. And yes, fertility drugs and chemistry works, but it's really interesting how accurate the conception elections are. Now, some people, no matter what you do, they may not be able to have children. Medicine says that, and so does astrology. In the Vedic and Nadi astrology, you can actually see when it's highly probable they won't conceive biological children, but they can adopt, right? But the interesting thing about conception elections is I actually had one doctor who agreed with his client to inseminate her with her husband's sperm at a good astrological time. She was 51 years old. She carried that child to term inside herself, had the baby naturally. And I think the child now is like almost 18 years old or 16 years old, totally healthy, no Down syndrome, no problems at all. So this is a little taste of interrogation and electional astrology, which is phenomenal. And I have to tell you a little history about this too. This stuff goes back. Some of the earliest documents known seem to be between 300 BC and about 100 BC, all the way up to 100 AD. This was really some cohesive, amazing astrology. And it was so, I think, important to the ancient rulers, kings and queens and pharaohs that in the early portions of, I think, around 300 AD to 400 AD, the sultans in Palestine and Arabia and Iraq and some, in Constantinople all realized just how incredibly valuable this type of astrology was. And they created something known as the House of Wisdom. And this bore a lot of translations out of Greek, out of the Coptic, and various different things, into the Arabic. And then many of the emperors discovered that between like the 6th and 8th and 9th century, and they were busily translating all this stuff. And we're talking stuff up in Austria, Germany, Spain, Italy, and I have a lot of these documents. There was an explosion of astrology, a resurgence, so to speak, between like, say, 400 and maybe 1200 AD. Just absolutely stunning, the amount of translations. So we have a lot of these that have been put into Latin, put into Arabic, and been translated now into English. And very amazing stuff, I have to say. And much more complex than modern astrology. This is way past sun sign stuff. They used very specific dignities. In fact, you can even tell the thoughts that someone is truly carrying when they ask a question. Now, people might say, well, why would you want to know that? Well, I often cast what we call a session or thought chart right at the beginning of a session with someone. Why? Because a lot of times we don't articulate what's really on our mind. We forget, or we're not aware, or we don't think of it, right? So what I love about that is it gives me clues to look at the person's signifactors in its placement in the chart. And it's actually called literally the astrology of thought. I'll hold this book up. It's really, they call it Search of the Heart. This is one translation that's quite elegant, done by Benjamin Dykes. And what a book. And this makes a comparative analysis of all these ancient astrologers, which were peppered again from the 1st through 8th century AD. And I should even say up to the 1100s. And that's a long time. That's over 1,000 years. And stunning stuff. And I apply it today, in our modern world. And it's so accurate, it's creepy. It proves the universe is an interactive consciousness.
It sure is. It sure is. Well,
Tell them your story about the gems.
Oh, we've talked about this before, but for anyone who hasn't heard, I have a number of gems, beautiful gems. And one day I was collecting laundry, preparing to do laundry. And I guess I scooped up my gems. I had taken them off. I scooped up my gems. I think I had them on the bed, and I must have tossed some clothes on top that were headed for the washing machine. So I scooped them all up, and unbeknownst to me, the gems ended up in the washing machine downstairs in the basement. And then the gems ended up in the dryer. And later on that day, I was, feeling for my gems, and I didn't have them on. And I asked Jeff to please cast a chart. Where are my gems? Will I find them again? And the chart showed that I would. And also, something that you didn't mention, which is so fascinating. A lot of times the chart will tell you, if it's something that's missing, where that might be located. Not only if you'll find it or not, but I remember it showed that the gems would be located near heat. Remember that?
Yep,
near
I
heat
sure do.
source. And
yeah,
so
and you should also tell them that she was in a multi-unit, complex with this laundry room with a lot of dryers and washers.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. But the chart showed I would find the gems, and weeks and weeks and weeks went by. I think about 4 or 5 weeks went by.
It was incredible. Yeah. And you were really getting nervous. And some of those gems you cannot replace.
No,
they're just, amazing.
Any of them. No, you can't replace any of them.
Yeah.
And one day I got a text from the manager of my building saying, because I had told her I lost the gems, because I looked in the hall and all that. I looked everywhere. But I didn't check the dryers in the laundry room. And apparently another tenant found them in a dryer, left them on top of the dryer. The manager of the building happened to walk into the laundry room just on that day and said, wow, I wonder if these are Ella's gems, if these are hers. So, and they were, and she put them in a bag and put them on my door, put the bag on my doorknob, and I got the gems back, just like the chart would say, just like the chart said. And what's interesting is they were near a heat source, right? The gems were in the dryer.
Yep, that's exactly right. Yeah. Oh, I could sit here and tell story after story. I literally have close to over 20,000 of these that I've actually got documented. I can't even believe I cast that many, but it's so amazing. I've had questions from missing things, and it'll also tell you if you won't find it too. If it's stolen. I've had people accuse people of, so-and-so stole my ring. I know he did, or I know she did. And I would tell them whether the chart said it did or didn't. I had one person swear up and down that an ex-boyfriend had stole their ring. And I said, I don't think he took it. Oh, yes, he did. I know he did. I said, oh, well, okay, called the police, got a police report, everything else, interrogated the guy. And then about a year and a half later, she says, you know what? I found the ring. I said, yeah, I told you, didn't steal it. So it's absolutely stunning. Lost treasures, or I should say treasure hunting. I've done a lot of forensics work too. I've had people in law enforcement, law enforcement's a bit hesitant to use scientific data that they can't present in court. But a lot of times people are interested in clues that can lead them to something, even if they can't bring it into court. So I've had a lot of interrogation stuff that I've used in missing persons and various different crime potentialities. And it's been amazing. I mean, it's absolutely stunning. And of course, love is a big thing. People are always interested in love. Animals. How many times have I done animals where someone's had a missing dog or cat? Will they come back? It'll say yes or no. And sicknesses of the animal. I've had horses where people have been veterinarians or they've had very expensive horses and they were very concerned about their well-being, and you can see that in the chart. So people, horses, small animals, pets, amazing stuff. Also trading and finances. Now I'm very careful with this because people get very emotional with financial things, and I cannot give people financial or medical advice, but I do tell them what the chart says. And I've had some great successes with financial expenditures in terms of investing in stock trading. But you got to be careful because these things are rapid and they need to be combined with technical analysis. And the biggest thing is emotions. I had one story years ago where this trader, we did some really successful trades by giving him feedback. In fact, I used to actually look at, and I still do at times, the public offering, the first public offering of a major corporation. And we would look at that date and time and extrapolate what we call the primary directions out on the company. And you could see whether the company was coming up or whether they'd actually be successful or they wouldn't be. And it was pretty doggone accurate. And the interesting thing is, this particular gentleman had made a lot of money, and he called me up and he said, "Hey, should I do this particular trade?" And I said, "I wouldn't do it." And not based on what I see. See, the ruler of your second house is money. Well, he got back on the phone with his broker and they got discussing these commodities, which, he was doing commodity trading, like trading places. And that's dangerous and very expensive stuff. You can lose your shirt or you can make a fortune on it. And what happened was he got emotional in discussion with the excitement of what this trade could bring, and he did it anyways. Well, he was selling beach houses and cars and went bankrupt. So they vacuumed his life right up after that disaster. So it's really interesting how, again, the universe is a mirror or interactive consciousness, whether you're asking questions or taking actions at certain times. And very, very useful to pay attention to. We still got to use skill. And see, that's one of the criticisms that you hear with astrology as well. But if you just did that, you would never do anything. You wouldn't learn anything. You would just sit around and cast charts. I don't advise that either. Astrology really works the best when you're engaged in something that you, A, know a lot about, or that you're really interested in. You don't necessarily have to know a lot about it, but it's got to be something not trivial, something that's really important and that has weight to you. And like you with your gems, I think you were pretty engaged when you said, "Hey, my God, I've lost all these gems. I cannot replace them." And, that was very meaningful to you. And you asked out of a need to know basis. I get people all the time calling up about health issues. And again, I always suggest, go to your doctor, get the allopathic data and see where you're at. Then I'll tell you what the chart says and you can make informed decisions from there. But when someone's about to die, that's got a lot of gravity, or you have a major health issue, so it's got to have weight, in business deals, relationships, children, all these areas of life that are important to us. It can give us good insight. Lawsuits is another one. Oh my God. So many lawsuits where I've had people go through these horrible trials, and the judge is the 10th house. The eastern horizon is usually the querent, and your opponent is the 7th house. And of course, if you're in a lawsuit with the government, which I hope you never get into, that is really tough to win. But they are the 10th house. So very interesting how this mirrors reality. There's a whole section in a 11th century astrologer that I really love. His name is Nadi. He has a whole section dedicated to war and trials and tribulations and litigations. You can actually see what the other side's attorneys, or if it's a war, like a physical war, you can see what their resources are like, whether they have good generals, good armies, good ammunition, all this stuff. It's all the way around the chart. Absolutely stunning how how ancient and how much this stuff was used.
Yeah, I can't say how much I love interrogation and electional astrology. I feel like everyone should be using it in their lives. So thank you, Jeff. Thanks a lot for this. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for watching. Stay healthy, stay positive, and we'll see you next week on Astrology Today with Jeff Harman.